It's fair to say that most movies let you know precisely what they're about from the first few scenes, establishing a style, mood and narrative through line which endures until the end credits roll about 2 hours later. But not all filmmakers are interested in just giving audiences precisely what they expect. It's a risky trick to shift genre, reinvent style, or just take the story to a wholly unexpected realm, which of course threatens to alienate less adventurous punters who may end up feeling manipulated. But when it works, it really works. I'm Cy for Whatculture.com, and these are 10 movies that are totally different by the end. Number 10. From Dusk Till Dawn. Robert Rodriguez's From Dusk Till Dawn begins as a modest yet pulpy thriller in which two criminal brothers, Seth and Richie Gecko, take a family hostage while fleeing to Mexico. It's as grimy and foul-mouthed as you'd expect from any Tarantino-penned thriller, yet that first half is ultimately just setting the stage for one of the most legendary genre shifts in cinema history. At the midway points, Rodriguez's film reveals itself to be a secret B-movie, that is, an action horror film filled with bloodthirsty vampires and cartoonish supporting characters who look like they fell straight out of a comic book. By film's end, when Seth and Kate emerge as the only survivors from a night of hilariously over-the-top brutality, it couldn't seem much more divorced from the opening sequence in which the geckos hold up a liquor store, no vampires in sight. For many movies, such a stark shift would simply tick the audience off, yet in From Dusk Till Dawn's case, the second half is such an absurdly entertaining, no-holds-barred blast that few have ever bothered to complain. Number 9. Audition. Takashi Miike's filmography is so absurdly eclectic, spanning from yakuza thriller to war epic to family comedy, that you can't ever be fully sure what you're about to see from him until the end credits have actually rolled. His 1999 film Audition, for example, begins as a seemingly down-the-line romantic drama in which a lonely widower, Shigehara Ayama, holds a series of mock auditions in an attempt to find a new wife. One gets the sense that Miike thoroughly enjoys toying with the audience throughout the film's first act, which is basically played entirely straight as an earnest melodrama. Though the object of Shigehara's affection, Asami, certainly acts oddly throughout the film, it isn't until the third act that Miike lets loose with a full-on stomach-churning horror show. Asami, who is revealed to be a jealously deranged psychopath, drugs Shigeharu with a paralytic agent, tortures him, and then uses a wire saw to cut off one of his feet. The nightmare scenario only ends when Shigeharu's son returns home and kicks Asami down the stairs to her death. That's quite the escalation from a bereavement dramedy that Miike offered us in the opening 40 or so minutes. Number 8. $1 Million Baby. When you start watching $1 Million Baby, it looks like the most typical Clint Eastwood movie ever made, a well-crafted, if familiar drama that sends the masses home happy. From its very first scenes, we're led to expect a conventional yet robust underdog sports tale in which an amateur boxer, Margaret Maggie Fitzgerald, attempts to reach the ranks of professional with the help of her grizzled old trainer Frankie Dunn. Yet at the end of the second act, there's a jaw-dropping turn where Maggie is sucker-punched from behind by an opponent between rounds and hits her head on a corner stool, breaking her neck. The rest of the film becomes a devastating drama which, rather than have Maggie recover from her injury and return to the ring, segues into a meditation on euthanasia as Frankie wrestles with Maggie's request to help her die. Ultimately, he complies, ending the film on a heart-wrenching yet brilliantly executed down note, which couldn't be further from the Rocky-esque underdog yarn most surely expected from the beginning. Number 7. The Guest. Adam Wingard's tenacious The Guest was largely sold as a horror film, and in fact one of the very first sights in the movie is of a jack-o'-lantern. The establishing scenes in which a grieving family are visited by David, an apparent army buddy of their dead son, set audiences up to anticipate a twisted, seemingly horrifying reveal involving David's true identity. Yet by Act 3, The Guest slaloms seamlessly into vaguely sci-fi action thriller territory when we learn that David was actually a test subject in a military super soldier experiment and is programmed to kill anyone who might compromise his identity. What follows is a bloodbath as David mows down anyone who gets in his way, before the film morphs again into a slasher flick when David chases remaining family members Anna and Luke through a haunted house. Hilariously though, Wingard defies our expectations once more as the film ends with Anna and Luke making it to apparent safety, albeit while a presumed dead David resurfaces once more, having somehow survived a brutal stab wound and disappears into the night. Needless to say, audiences considered many possible endings for The Guest, but a third act that weaved between 3 distinct genres, sci-fi, action and horror, probably wasn't on their minds. Number 6. Miracle Mile. Cult 80s thriller Miracle Mile does a frankly magnificent job of luring the audience into a false sense of security. The first 20-ish minutes introduce us to lead Harry and his love interest Julie without even a hint of the horrors awaiting them. The establishing scenes are styled in the vein of a corny, cutesy rom-com as Harry and Julie meet, quickly fall for one another, and agree to meet at a coffee shop after her work shift ends. But oh shucks, a power cut means that Harry doesn't wake up on time. It sounds like a totally banal misunderstanding on which to hinge a perfectly mediocre indie rom-com, and yet writer-director Steve DeJarnette has something else in store altogether. As it turns out, Harry answers a payphone at the coffee shop and is informed by the person on the other end of the line that nuclear war is apparently set to break out within 70 minutes. At this point, Miracle Mile morphs into a paranoid suspense thriller in which Harry attempts to ascertain the truth while making contact with Julie. And as almost polar opposite to their adorable date at the start of the movie, it ends with the pair trapped in a helicopter that's sinking into La Brea tar pits, the very place they met at the start of the film. With no means of escape, they resign themselves to their fate, their only solace being that a direct hit from a nuke would turn them into diamonds. Lovely. Number 5. Kill List. Ben Wheatley's 2011 crime flick Kill List offers a straightforward yet intriguing premise as two former British soldiers, Jay and Gal, take a job to carry out 3 killings in exchange for a hefty payday. Though weirdness soon enough abounds as it becomes clear there's something more to Jay and Gal's mission. One of their target thanks them for killing him. It isn't until the final 15 minutes that things finally come into focus. As the pair prepare to carry out their third hit, they observe a cult ritual in the woods, which culminates in a human sacrifice, prompting an alarmed Jay to open fire on the assembled crowd. Gal is then mortally wounded by the cultists, while Jay is knocked unconscious and wakes up in a field where he's stripped, fitted with a mask, and told to kill his final target, the Hunchback, who is armed with a knife. Jay complies, only to learn that the Hunchback was in fact his wife Shell and son Sam, hidden under a mask and coat. The film then ends ambiguously, with the cult seemingly crowning Jay as their new king. For a film that was largely presented as a gritty, low-budget crime thriller, the sharp left turn into folk horror, even with the preceding weirdness leading up to it, was a bracingly effective shock. Number 4. Hancock. Hancock starts off as a damn fun time, an incredibly silly and puerile comedy in which an alcoholic superhero, John Hancock, causes all manner of destruction across LA before PR specialist Ray Embry steps in to try and help rehabilitate his image. Though that basic setup sounds like the recipe for an entertainingly broad comedy, the script, co-written by Breaking Bad's Vince Gilligan, had something else in mind. At the start of the third act, we learn that Ray's wife Mary is also a superhero, and more to the point, she and Hancock were previously married until Hancock lost his memory in an accident 80 years earlier and she left him. Moreover, the closer together Hancock and Mary are, the more mortal they become, and in order to maintain their powers, they must again split up. And so, Hancock's finale becomes a far more dour and earnest story than the hour of silly fun times that preceded it, offering up a mawkish pondering on the nature of godlike entities and a thoroughly sappy ending in which Hancock takes leave so that Mary and Ray can reconcile. Number 3. Bone Tomahawk. S. Craig Zahler's Bone Tomahawk is a western quite like no other, despite the fact that it seems to be a totally conventional entry at first sight. Even with a bloody opening sequence in which 2 brigands are brutally murdered by a local native, Zahler's film seems to be operating fully within the tradition of a good old-fashioned pulpy western romp. At the end of the first act, Sheriff Franklin Hunt forms a rescue party to retrieve a number of locals believed to have been kidnapped by troglodytes, that is, a tribe of inbred murderous cannibals. Even with the troglodytes' nature being clearly described to us so early on, most of the movie's remainder plays out as a fairly familiar, albeit well-crafted, western journey. That is, at least, until we reach Act 3 and Hunt's party finally comes face to face with the troglodytes themselves. At this point, Bone Tomahawk mutates into a nauseatingly violent horror film in which Hunt is forced to witness Deputy Nick be scalped, ripped in half and eaten. The remainder of the movie is a glorified slasher joint as Hunt and his fellow survivors escape their imprisonment and attempt to murder the troglodyte horde, which they largely do in wildly grisly fashion. Number 2. Sorry to Bother You. Sorry to Bother You starts off as an apparent workplace satire in the vein of Office Space, albeit from the perspective of the black experience, as our protagonist Cash gets a job as a telemarketer and begins to mask his personality in order to perform better. For most of the movie, we observe Cash rising through the company's ranks, and as he becomes wealthy, seemingly abandoning his prior pro-worker idealism. But writer-director Boots Riley pulls a sharp handbrake turn in Act 3 when Cash attends a party held by his company's CEO, Steve Lift, and discovers a group of human-horse hybrids shackled up. Bet you didn't see that one coming. It turns out Lift is using a gene-modifying power to transform his employees into Equisapiens, who are stronger and more obedient and therefore generates more money for the company. At film's end, Cash himself begins to sprout 3 horse-like nostrils and then leads an army of revolting Equisapiens to break down the front door of Lift's home. Did a single living soul see such an insane shift coming from black comedy to surreal fantasy sci-fi? Number 1. 10 Cloverfield Lane. Even with the word Cloverfield in the title, Paramount and producer J.J. Abrams decided to market their spin-off 10 Cloverfield Lane as a claustrophobic, self-contained thriller largely taking place in a single location. And indeed, it kicks off with protagonist Michelle crashing her car and waking up in an underground bunker alongside survivalist Howard and another resident Emmett. Howard claims that apocalyptic situation above ground makes it impossible for them to leave the compound for a few years, and both Michelle and we as viewers are basically immediately distrustful of him. Yet 10 Cloverfield Lane veers suddenly off course in the last 10 minutes when Michelle escapes Howard to the outside world and learns that he was basically sorta right. She soon enough spots an alien biomechanical craft in the distance and spends the movie's remaining minutes battling a creature which drops from it. Even though many expected to see an alien monster at some point in the film, by this time it was so close to wrapping up that many had just assumed that 10 Cloverfield Lane would indeed be a mere psychological thriller set within the Cloverfield universe. It finally shifted gears at the very end,